Welcome to Practically Pastoring, a podcast by pastors for pastors who want to share ideas, become better shepherds, and have a good time with friends. My name is Frank Gill. I'm a campus pastor in the beautiful and sunny Milwaukee, Wisconsin. All the way from Baltimore, Maryland, Jeff Simpson.
Hello.
Down in Sumter, South Carolina, Delmar Pete.
Hello there.
Also, somehow COVID-free, all the way in Tarpon Springs, Florida, Timothy Miller.
Howdy.
And lastly, sitting in for Andrew, he is a life groups and online campus pastor at Harbor Point Church in San Juan Capistrano, California, Jeff Bachman.
Hey, what to do, nephew?
Jeff, I'm so glad that you're here. I have so many questions for you. How is California? How is living in literal paradise, but also tyranny, apparently? How's it all going for you?
California is both liberal and conservative, so it's good. You get to feel the pull. It's, we're fine out here, just like everywhere else. I think I'm trying to figure out how to give you a status of how we are without totally giving my full opinion. I think we have groups and organizations that say that they're being persecuted against because they can't meet in a building. And yet no one's telling them that they can't worship Jesus. So we're doing just fine. God's still good, and our church never closed. So that's the way that I see this, is God never stopped. He didn't stop on March 15th when we were told to shut down, and he hasn't yet. So we're good. And this is the first year in 28 years I haven't gone to summer camp. So I don't know if that's a blessing or...
How'd that feel?
It was freeing. It was It was nice. I've slept in my own bed most of the summer, so it was weird. Man, it's been, and this goes into every part of kind of my journey, which I found out. I mean, I can get into this now, or we can wait until you actually ask the question.
Let's get into it now. Tell us.
So, I was asked before Christmas break of 2019 if I would consider and pray about what it looked like for me to transition out of student ministries and to head up our life group ministry, which at that point, I told him I had never really, I have not one day of my life woken up thinking, gosh, I can't wait until the day that I become a life groups pastor. Like, that's every boy's dream. And so we kind of talked. And I think one of the things I had always said that I wanted to, if I was going to leave where I'm at and what I'm doing in student ministries, I had thought that becoming a campus pastor or, kind of on that sort of a track would be something that I'd like. And they said, well, we actually see that in you too, but you haven't spent a whole lot of time in the DNA of who we are as a church. And if we as a church are doing life groups and Rooted, which is a network that was kind of birthed out of Mariners out here in Southern California, which is essentially where Harbor Point comes out of as well, that if you haven't spent any time in that, then it's going to be hard for you to really replicate the DNA of our church. So we want you to come and do that, and to also help architect some of who we are as a church. And so that became a little bit more appealing than just becoming as a life groups pastor. I feel like the stereotype of that is you just do everything the senior pastor doesn't like to do. So that was something that I prayed about and talked with my wife about. And end of January, start of February is when I decided that I was going to make that transition. So we announced it to our students. We began the process of kind of saying, hey, I'm going to be stepping down, but they've been kind enough to allow me to help choose my successor to kind of help set the student ministries off, and then COVID. So this literally has been for me. I made the decision in January, and I actually, I think you guys are literally the first people that I'm telling, because I don't think this is going to go public until a couple days later. When does this go live?
Tomorrow, actually.
Tomorrow.
Okay, that's good enough. So, how about this? We have offered, and we have offered, and someone is accepted as the high school pastor. So I literally am meeting with them today to give them literal and figurative keys. I emptied out my office yesterday. So all these things that I've been sitting here waiting to do since January is what I get to do. And again, none of it, I don't blame anyone for it. It was in the middle of a pandemic. Our church wanted to be wise about saying, we don't want to hire somebody on staff if we're going to have to lay them off 6 months later because we don't have the funds for that. And so we had to put our search process on hold. We had to do all those sorts of things. And so the idea, literally August 1st, though I've had this job title and a small pay bump, I for the first time, August 1st is going to be the first time that I actually get to feel what it to live and feel what it feels like to be a life groups pastor and online campus pastor. So refer to me as that too, gentlemen.
Now, it's interesting because, like, I think Delmar and I are in a similar situation as you are, is we made this transition literally a handful of months right before COVID. And then now we're in COVID. And so, like, even all the things that we were able to, like, kind of mentally process of, okay, if I transition, this is what it looks like. This is what it would look like. This is what we'll be doing. It's nothing like that, right? Like, it's not at all what we even signed up for when we made this transition. And just like you, we have had to now learn new skills and add things to our resume to be able to even do the job that we're doing now, which wasn't even a job, 6 months ago or whatever. So I guess go ahead.
No, I think one of the biggest things that I'm grateful for is where I'm at now, but I'm even more grateful that I didn't have a clue about COVID when I was interviewing for this or whatever, because knowing that was coming, I know who I am. And I'd be like, man, I'm not going to be on a new frontier with a new thing and a new career, So for me, like, not knowing was, I think, the biggest grace that I ever had.
Yeah, and I would say it's similar. I'm not sure if I would have decided to go on and uproot my entire life. Like, my benefit is I get to stay in my church, kind of like you, Frank. Like, I'm still in the system. I'm still part of the same church, and so these are people I trust the leadership and the organization. But I'm not sure if I would have said, I'm going to toss away. I mean, I've done youth ministry for 28 years, and then to sit here and go, during a pandemic, why don't we give something else a new shot? So I don't know if I'm that kind of a risk taker.
28 years, man, that is respect. That's all I'm going to say. That is.
Is it, or is it I just needed to leave sooner? I don't know.
I'm going to choose the former.
Any ministry for 28 years is respect, man.
Yeah, true that.
Jeff, I have a question for you in regards to this, and I think I would love to hear Delmar, Tim, and even Jeff if you have an answer for this. But, like, one thing I was thinking of, because it was so close to, like, I transitioned and then COVID happened, is there are things I think about, like, if I were still in student ministry, I was still in my former job, it would have been cool if I got this opportunity because I got to be creative and do that, but I don't have those opportunities because I'm in this new role. Like, one thing I think about, which I'm like partly glad I don't get to do it, but also glad, like, I kind of like wish I had the opportunity, was I'm seeing all these churches, innovate in student ministry by doing like talk shows or doing like these very interesting things where they go to different houses and drop off stuff as a way of like pastoring them. What are the things that, like, since you transitioned before COVID, but you've kind of get to observe student ministry from a distance during this COVID season, what is like one or two things that you're like, man, I wish I had the opportunity to do this? Or on the other hand, maybe what's the thing that you're glad you didn't have to deal with being a youth pastor in this COVID time?
Yeah. I'll take first because I've been sitting in that this past week. Our church just hired one of my former students to take my position. So, like, that actually was announced today. So, like, being able, like, to me, there's a little satisfaction in that. But they are doing the thing that I really wanted to do. We had our services split between middle school and high school because we needed to for a period. And then we lit it out in our facilities. And there was no more space. And I actually remember thinking to myself 8 months ago, the next step for this ministry is putting it back together and moving it to the main worship center. But it would take an act of God to do that because we're so stuck in our rut. And now, like, literally, they're doing that. And so I do think, like, there's a part of me that's like, man, I felt like I was able to look out over the promised land, and be like, that's it. Because I know when it hits that and they fill that new space, I know what that's going to do. But at the same time, that feeling of being able to step out so someone else can step in and carry it. I'll be honest, man, I'm very happy, but that's also bittersweet. And I think if it wasn't, I probably wouldn't be in the right place emotionally with it. So
I think for me as a lead pastor, I was a bit conservative when we went to our all online gatherings. I was safe. I didn't take a ton of chances. I mean, we experimented with some just a few different, we didn't do a traditional on stage setting. We kind of did the back of the worship center thing to give it a different vibe and feel. But for the most part, I still felt like we were pretty safe in our creative choices. Had I been a youth pastor, I kind of feel like it would have been just all bets are off. I would have just kind of done whatever, just for the sake of having some fun with it. So I kind of miss having that freedom to just go all in and experiment creatively with what does an online or a virtual student ministry look like. That would have been really fun to experiment with.
I mean, from the worship world, I would say the same thing. I would love to have gotten lost in the musician side of like making the song videos of multiple people playing and just like losing myself in the recording process and all that would be pretty fun.
Would you make the 1000th version of Blessing for it's like every church, every city, every state made their version of the Blessing.
Yeah,
which is a dope song.
I would have participated in the one we had
for
here.
sure.
And
I saw Blessing with an instrumental interlude this week with the Star Wars theme in it. Like that touched my soul on multiple levels.
Yeah. I was saying the Jewish one in Israel, like the one it's not Jewish, but like the one where it's all in Hebrew. I was like, that's kind of dope. Anyways, Jeff, what do you got?
I think for me, because at the start of COVID, it was me going, dude, I get to leave with like all kind of like what Tim said, all bets are off and I get to do whatever. And I think, and again, there's probably lots of different factors in this, but I look at it and go, a lot of the things that we tried, though I can sit back and look at it and say, I'm proud of the product that we made. I don't think that it landed with our students. The two things that landed with our students were life groups. And even that was like, and then service opportunities within our community, which is what I would say I'm most proud of our church is that we kept our doors open by being an essential service where things were dropped off and we were providing and helping to care for our community. And so our students were able to come in and serve. So for me, it wasn't the sexy online stuff. It wasn't the overproduced things. And again, like I step back and look at what we did and say, I'm proud of our product. And yet it felt like a free fall for 6 months. So for me to almost feel the relief and release of just going like, I don't have to solve this for students coming up in this future generation, and to say it's the answer's out there, and I've got to like, and if somebody were to tell me that I was going to be the one climbing that hill, I'd do it. But to go, I don't have to solve it, and I honestly don't think that people have. The talk shows are sexy, and the Instagram live stuff is fun, but I think the people who are doing it love making it, and I haven't heard of many, and again. I could be in overexposed Southern California, but I haven't heard of a lot of students going, man, I can't wait for this thing to go live. And again, that could be putting a lot of different people on blast as far as what they're doing. And I'm not saying that what they're producing isn't good. I'm saying nothing has captured the head and the hearts of students other than just saying, I wrote you a note, I dropped by your house. And so it almost feels like 1990s youth ministry again, where you're like, I don't have a pager. I'm gonna swing by your house and I'm gonna drop off a pizza. And like that's probably the best ministry that we did in the last 6 months was we did paper, rock, scissors pizza.
I love it. Jeff, I think you
and I'm writing a book on that, so that's mine.
You get that. I think we talked about this last episode, the episode before that, where we just talked about like I think what COVID has exposed us is really big churches are doing really great productions. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think if you could do it well, do it well. The cringiest thing is if you're not doing it well and you're trying to do a big production, then it just feels very awkward. But the thing that COVID exposes is that ultimately people are hungry for like personal interaction, to being pastored, to having those relationships. And it's those touch points that have way more collateral and equity in our relationship with our people than having a really well-produced like service online or something. I mean, we talk about, I think it was last episode, Jeff was talking about like all the hours he put in on, getting Ethernet cables to go outside to do these outside services. And I've talked about, all the elements of making a production and putting thousands of dollars in multicam things. But as that's a great product, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with any of that stuff. But what our people want is that relationship. And I think sometimes our people misconstrue the relationship with we have to be in the church, but ultimately what they want is that connection with other people, because we were never meant to be created in isolation. And I think that's
remember on the
COVID exposed that.
Oh, go ahead. You remember on the front end, everybody was like, we're together and apart, and we were selling it as hard as we could. I feel like right now people, at least a lot of them, are finally getting yo, that's not together. At least that's what my hope is. And I think that the struggle that I feel, and I think this translates across all ministries, student all the way up to, to senior citizens ministry, is right now we don't have the strength of the platform, and we're having to do the thing we were originally called to do anyways, and that's pastor people. And that's just by nature harder. I mean, I personally would rather hook up a cam link to a nice camera and put some good lighting on and say my little stories. But like writing cards and getting in people's world is a lot harder. And I think, to me, that's where we all have that commonality right now. And we can actually speak to each other now. Whereas used to, if I was in the youth world, I was only in my little culture and pastor world was in their little culture. I see right now, like, we're all feeling kind of like we're in it together, in the sense that none of our platforms are shining. The only thing we do is be a pastor.
Yeah. I know Justin Knowles over on the DYM blog just posted an article about how like online youth ministry is not going to like effectively reach the needs of our students. And I think that can translate very easily by changing a couple words with the rest of the people of our church. You know what I'm saying? Like, as much as like we can create great chat prompts in our church online platform, we can have really cool hosts for our Facebook, all the things we want to do, right? Ultimately, it's like the relationships is what our people need. And
okay,
that's good.
But if that's true, then why is it that that's still the thing that we're bragging about?
Ooh.
Like, out of the same mouth of, and right. I love Justin Knowles. He's a great friend. But out of the same mouth, like, the thing that I see come out of their ministry is, man, just film so many things, and it's awesome, and can't wait for you to see this. Mm-hmm. And yet we all sit here and say, like, so we as a nation, we as Big C Church need to get away from then sharing these things on, because they're not the thing. Like, all five of us have just said that that's not working, and yet that's still what we're yelling.
Well, and I would say for me, it's still what I'm so easily tempted to just like spend hours thinking about, like, how am I going to hook up the camera, and where am I going to, and who's going to run it, and what's and I get all anxious about it. And it's like, I could have written 5 notes to people. And I mean, a question I asked myself as a worship pastor when it came to picking songs was like, if like in 10 years, what are people going to remember from the lyrics? I think it's a good question pastorally to ask right now. Like, in 10 years from now, when hopefully things are back to normal, like, what will people remember about what our church did during COVID? They're not going to remember that we had 3 cameras. I mean, I probably will, but most
and frankly, I also feel like we can sit here. It's easy to brag about our production, because then it doesn't necessarily point straight at us. But if I'm taking a picture of me writing a note to somebody, then I look like a total douchebag. Mm-hmm. So it's like, so I can't be loud about the things that I'm going to be, but I'm afraid that somebody's going to forget about me.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Dude,
I think to kind of close this conversation, I think not that I feel like I have to defend Justin. We all love him. He's a great guy.
Just to be clear, I love Justin. This is not. Justin became the scapegoat for an example that I see across the nation.
I for sure. And I think we talked about this last week. Andy Stanley did the really bold thing of saying we're not having in-person services, but they're reinvesting some of the funds to do community outreach, right? And like a church as big as North Point has the opportunity to do amazing production while simultaneously doing amazing in-person personal pastoral touches, right? And to an extent, I think Justin at his church can probably do both, right? They can have an amazing production and have like those personal context, which I think he's aware of in terms of like great production, personal contact. I think if it's true that majority of churches in America are less than 100 people, and if majority of churches in America don't have the funds to do multicam stuff and things like that, where are we investing our time and energy? Probably should not be in the production side of things, but more on actually pastoring our people, because it's very easy to flex the production. It's much more difficult to do the hard work of going to people's houses who A, believe in conspiracy theories, who B, are mad at protesters, who C, want you to protest, who D, want you to believe these conspiracy. Like, there's so many. It's way more messier to be in the lives of people pastoring than it's to say, okay, if I spend $1,000, I can upgrade my camera and get some good lighting. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a way easier conversation than it is. But I
don't want to downplay the preaching of the word and
for sure,
and singing together. Like, we as a church, we did not have an online presence before March of 2020. And the overwhelming response I've heard from my people, my church of 200, 250 is thank you so much for allowing me to continue to worship with my church family online. There's been a huge outpouring of thankfulness for that. And it's because I went to the elders and said, can I have $1,200 to buy another camera and some lights so we can take this thing online? And so, yes, we still need the physical touches, but there was also a big benefit in being able to go online for a lot of my people who still are not comfortable coming back to church yet.
I just collectively moved us online.
Right. Yeah, I think there's always going to be like a minimum bar of kind of excellence. Right. But I think the danger, for me at least, is when I allow myself to kind of go down the rabbit hole of taking it too far and using it as an escape to actually pastor people.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you just escape into like, well, if I get this resolution, then more engagement. And it's like actually the most 100% guaranteed engagement you can get with 90% of my congregation is a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
They're 100% engaged in that conversation. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, but that doesn't make me feel better about my cool self and my church's Facebook page.
True.
Well, and I think that we have a responsibility in whatever voice we have, whether it's a guesting on a podcast or if you have a podcast or a leader in your church, we can't make that the collective North Star. If we all sit here and say that, yeah, we got to get back to basics and this and that, then that needs to be the thing that we celebrate. Tim, I totally agree with you. Our online presence is better than it's ever been, and we're able to reach out to more people. And so praise God that like we were forced in that way.
Sure.
But if that becomes the thing that we celebrate, that then becomes the thing that everyone else then tries to become too.
Yeah,
so then let's become people who love people.
Right.
Yeah, amen. Guys, wow, we started this show hot, and I love it, and it's a great conversation. Man, Delmar clipped this part because this is worth discussing. Hey, let's keep the show along. We're getting into some clergy cliff notes.
I think it's good. So this one is like such the product of our culture, guys. So really quick, I was thinking about how we open this one up, but what is your favorite superhero? Like, what's your favorite superhero?
I mean, I think the world of Spider-Man. So like the different variations of Spider-Man.
The multiverse of Spider-Man?
Yeah, like I love Miles Morales. I love Peter Parker. I love, all the variations of that kind of character because anything that makes like a human superhero is dope for me.
Truth.
Power and responsibility. I agree with Frank.
Yep. No, I was a Spider-Man guy for the longest time until Guardians of the Galaxy. Star-Lord came around and just kind of had that vibe of just kind of laid back. I'm going to listen to my tunes and I'm going to help out where I can. I kind of dig that vibe too.
What about you, Jeff?
I'd throw my hat in with Spider-Man too. I mean,
y'all are all Spider-Man men.
He's the perfect super.
He's great.
Let me guess, yours is Leonardo or something, right?
Which turtle?
Which turtle?
You suck because that was actually the one. Hold up. In all fairness, I grew up. It was Raphael, and then I grew up and became a man. All right. No, but
no,
okay.
It's Donatello.
No, it's Leonardo. It really is. So. But Frank, it makes me feel good that you know me like that, But seriously, I guess the point I was getting at is the thing that makes a good superhero good is the same thing that we're seeing translating into pastorate now and even leadership in general. It is the strength, but it's the backstory and it's the weakness. Like as even you were talking about the multiverse, I'm thinking every single version of Spider-Man has like a very wounded past. Mm-hmm. Star-Lord's mother got cancer given to him by his father, and then he had to murder his father. Isn't that right?
Yeah. That's right.
And then Leonardo, there's a whole new backstory to that. You don't want me to get into that. I promise you. I should start a whole other podcast. But it's the same thing. It's like woundedness. And I think what you could summarize it up is transparency in who they are. And Carey Nieuwhof actually had an article he just released, and he was talking about where's the line between us being transparent as leaders versus bleeding over into oversharing. Because I know that all of us, and maybe I think all of us to some extent are guilty of it. We've had moments where we're trying to be transparent. Maybe there's something coming down the pipe and you're trying to think through it out loud. And maybe you just accidentally overshare and you're like, man, I shouldn't have let that person go there because all it did was create anxiety in them. So I guess, first of all, real talk, transparency. Has there ever been a time when maybe you were over transparent and probably overshared a little bit? Anybody have a moment you like to talk about?
I mean, last year I went through a major transition at my church, obviously. And at the beginning stages, I didn't really have a good outlet for it. So during the first few weeks, I used the morning after ministry show to kind of just unload a little bit, which is a very dangerous space to do that on a public Facebook show where your entire church can watch and then go back and rewatch and listen to on a podcast. And I got some really good critique from my elders on, hey, we understand you wanting to be transparent and you fleshing out some of these feelings you're going through, but it's possible that a social setting like that is not the best way to do that.
I know. I remember one time I was preaching a sermon, and I talked about growing up, which is not something that's like very private for me, but my father was very abusive. He was an alcoholic, and he used to like hit my mom. And I remember one aspect, I was sharing this in the story. I was like, my dad was like about to hit my mom or something, and I was like 12, so I was like a pretty big kid, and I got in my dad's face, and I was like, "You're never gonna hit him again." Like that was like a big, like I was gonna use it as like a kind of a climactic part of my sermon. I forgot kind of what the whole context of the sermon was, but I remember in sermon critique about my sermon, one thing. Obviously, I'm Cuban. I'm very passionate, and sometimes my passionateness in my sermon, it comes off as like emotional, I guess. And so someone said like, hey, have you completely processed like what you went through? Because there's a line of being transparent and then like bleeding in the pulpit. And if you haven't been able to process kind of the wounds and the pains you've gone through in your personal life, it's probably not the place to process that in the pulpit, because you may like rip open wounds in other people who are still in the midst of that. And I remember hearing that, and I actually chose not to talk about that moment, not because I haven't processed it, but I just wanted to make sure I truly have processed it before I say it in front of a bunch of people. But I've always kind of thought about that. It's like, where is the line of transparency? Because I think the mark of a good pastor is being able to highlight what Scripture says and connect it to real life issues, especially when it's connected to real life issues within your own life. But how do you do that in a way that doesn't, I don't know, hurt your reputation? Is that a good word? Or like hurt your credibility? I'm not sure like how to word that, but like, I don't know. This is a great conversation because I don't know the answer to this question, because I'm such a transparent person that like I'm apologizing all the time by how transparent I try to be, and I realize I should probably figure it out. So go ahead.
I found that I think as a younger senior pastor, you can undermine your own leadership without intending to by doing this, because you can almost put your own immaturity on display, whether that be emotional unhealth or just, I'm 35, so I haven't lived as long as most of the members of my church, and they've experienced things that I haven't experienced yet. And so I think for me, if I think of an example, it would be I know that I have overshared things about the previous ministry I was in, and the kind of toxicity of that and the pain that caused, and what it comes out as bitterness that's unresolved in me. Which there probably still is some bitterness unresolved in me. And so that's where I tend to, I sort of display an immaturity when it comes to my own bitterness, that then it's hard to lead people out of their own bitterness, so that's where it's tricky. And I also think for me, one of the big insecurities I deal with is people pleasing. And so I can tend to overshare as a way to people please, like to connect with somebody and almost pull them into my own pain or whatever. And, and I know that in the past I have probably not lied, but fudged how hard something was or how bad something was so that they would relate to me more easily. And that's part of that people pleasing thing. So I think you got to be careful of that. But like you said, when weakness just happens in front of people, that, that's okay. I shared with you guys a few weeks back, I made like a big mistake on an online service where I didn't edit something out, and it just broadcast as, we're doing virtual live, and I missed a couple edits in a sermon. And like people in the chat and later on told me like, wow, I relate to you so much more knowing that you're not actually like, you know, that you're not perfect when you deliver these sermons online or whatever. So I think those are okay because it just happened. I didn't like manufacture that. I didn't try to, but I think where it gets dangerous and oversharing is when you start to get into the territory, for me, of displaying an immaturity in some way or trying to pull people into your insecurities like people pleasing.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I think heading into it, just recognizing that at our best on a healthy day, all of us kind of have some desire to be rock stars and songwriters. Mm-hmm. And so we all have a little bit of Taylor Swift in us where anything that we're going to use for our own content is typically going to be something pulled from our own experience. So recognizing that, and also that even if it's that we're not oversharing about ourselves, but other people, like I've gotten to a point where I now have to clear all stories through my kids because they're 10, 12, and 14. Yeah. So sure. Like my life cannot be a sermon illustration for all the world to see. And then I think the other part is recognizing, like knowing the power of how and if and when we communicate, because on social media, once it's out there, we can't control the narrative and people aren't necessarily going to read what we're sharing. Like in a sermon, it's one thing because you're able to hear voice inflection and I'm able to control that. Even if it's rewatched, it may be oversharing, but at least I'm able to control that. Whereas if I go and put something on a post or I respond, or even if I like something, then all of a sudden people are able to interpret that in a totally different way. We had, as all of us as a nation have kind of stepped into this conversation of racism and Black Lives Matters and all those sorts of things. I was in an attempt to show love for somebody who was pretty aggressively against not only the white evangelical church, but our church specifically. I was trying to, through social media, to show, hey, I don't agree with you, but I still love you. Somebody screenshotted that and sent it to my senior pastor. Oh. And so like I've come to that place of going, oh, actually, like how transparent can I be? Not very. And I think the other thing that I've seen, and I was in fact talking with my wife about it this last week, I find it interesting that as soon as people who are in church ministry leave, they all of a sudden become very verbal about anything from face masks to presidential campaigns to if Black Lives Matter to COVID and conspiracy theories. So, I'm not saying that they leave the church and then all go to one side, but it's that all of a sudden it's just interesting that actually as pastors and as people on church, I actually think we're keeping a lot of things in and under that we can't say. And as soon as you leave the church, I'm seeing all of my friends that have just left the church for lots of different reasons in the last few years have some very strong opinions that they didn't share a year ago. And you're like, oh, okay. So the church was actually giving you a bit of a lid that maybe we all want to keep on that.
So as pastors, should we err on the side of not sharing enough, or should we err on the side of oversharing? I think I've gone back and forth on this. I probably still err on the side of oversharing at times for my personal life. Not necessarily every little thing I believe.
So Tim, let me ask you this. Let me ask it to you this way. Yeah. You have kids of different ages, right? How old's your oldest kid and your youngest kid?
Ages 10 down to 3, 5 kids.
Okay. So there are things you will talk to your 10-year-old about that you will not talk to your 3-year-old about. And if they're in the room together, you're going to default to the 3-year-old pretty much, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's a good way to think about, like, we have to default to what the least mature factor is, especially on social media, man. Like it's just, it's not a breeding ground for eloquent speech and mature thought. It's literally designed for outrage because that's
I disagree
what
with
gets
that.
Clicks. You do?
No, not at all.
That was him on social media.
Yeah. That was me on social media. I was.
Yeah. So I think, there's stuff that I talk to my wife about that we don't talk about in front of our 5-year-old, because she can't handle that decision. I think that's what oversharing is to me, is like there's a sense in which the seat we sit in as pastors is almost like team dad, so to speak. Like we're overseers of this group of people who we're also a part of, but the role we play is the role of like a father in a family. We protect, we oversee, we provide. And there's things that we don't talk about in front of the kids. There's arguments my wife and I don't have in front of our daughter because she can't handle that anxiety and that she's not emotionally mature enough to deal with that. And I just think that's one way to think about it. If you have multiple kids, 10 and 3, you default to the 3-year-olds level when they're all in the room together. And on social media, you should just assume they're all in the room together.
I think that's super wise, because you can't control the audience of who's going to see things.
Right.
And just because something's true does not mean that it needs to be said. There's a lot of things in my life. I think my wife and I have a wonderful relationship that is beautiful and loving and intimate, and nobody needs to know about that. And so but I think unfortunately we get to a place where we want to try and connect. Our profession is connecting with people. And so because we connect with people, we find the things that connect well. And so you're like, oh, if that was good, then just wait for this story or this truth or this thing in my life. And I think that we have to be careful. And again, I've done that probably as much as anybody else. So it's not saying Tim, is you saying I probably overshare. I do too. But I think especially in this last 6-month season and stepping into now more adult ministry, though, I would say in the last couple of years, I've probably done more parent ministry and family ministry than actual youth ministry, of just going for the sake of connecting, I can't go and lay those things on the altar.
I think to me, oversharing, it can progress in our lives. For me, oversharing used to be me being passive aggressive. The worst. I'm about to admit something to y'all. This is absolutely freaking embarrassing, but the worst overshare I ever did was in one of those large youth pastor groups. And I came to this church and they said that they would only purchase PCs and wouldn't purchase Macs. And I don't even know how to use a PC anymore. One day I was in the sanctuary just hanging out, and I looked up in the tech deck and realized every computer in the tech deck was Mac. And I just recorded. I was like, our church only purchases PCs. And I just, they were up there. And I just posted the video super passive aggressively. Somebody went into the youth pastor group, screenshotted the picture, went to our church website, looked up our senior pastor and said, your head student guy is putting your whole church on blast. And then I'm getting a call on a Saturday from the senior pastor, which in my church, if you get a call on a Saturday, that's bad. So for me, that's when I first started realizing emotional intelligence is so vital when it comes to oversharing. You have to be keyed in on how you feel, and you have to be keyed in on how other people are seeing you. So I got away from that, and then it moved into okay, I'm not going to do it passive aggressively, but now I may overshare out of basically it's the old school. Here's a prayer request, except now it's more I'm confiding into you. And I've learned there's for me, I have to have, I don't know if you would call them, but some barriers set up in my own life, to make sure that I don't overshare. I'll just level with you, this pastor group of us meeting, it's a great barrier for me, because sometimes we get on the chat a little earlier before we start recording, and man, that's healthy for me, because a transition for me, and I know a few of y'all have transitioned and stayed in the same church. When you transition and stay in the same church, that the people who you used to could confide in, now that you're in a different space in leadership, it hurts them to pull you into that space. And I've had to learn, there are people who are my best friends on staff, and I love them. But right now, loving them well means not filling them in on everything I know. And that's been really hard, because it almost can feel are we not friends anymore? But it's not that at all. I'm trying to figure out where transparency and oversharing is. I don't know how you are. A lot of times I hate it about myself. I wear my feelings on my sleeve sometimes. I can't get in an argument with you.
Dude, I wear them on my face.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I can't get in an argument with you and then we walk out this room and do church. I wish I could. So I'm having to figure out, where do I take that in a healthy place? And I don't know if you guys have any barriers that you've set up to kind of help you mitigate that, but I'd love to hear anything y'all have done.
Delmar, I really like that you said that you've had this shift in your church and your role responsibilities. Now there's people that you used to confide in that you no longer can, because that's literally right where I am. I had this conversation with my wife probably 2 months ago, that I felt like some of the best friends I had at my church are no longer my best friends at my church. It's not because we're any less friendly. It's just because I don't feel like it's a safe place or it's healthy for them to, confide with them. Because there was, quite a few people who were walking with me alongside this transition into the senior pastoral role that I find myself in, who I needed to talk to. And now I find myself, not wanting to go down that road with them anymore. So it's a good discussion for us.
I mean, I think it is so easy for us to bleed over into an unhealthy manipulation of people by, what we're talking about is oversharing. But like I said, where you start to, I'm sharing things with you to get you to feel a certain way about either a decision or another person, and I mean, I just think that's like tool in the hand of Satan to divide the church if you're not careful. So I think a barrier is you got to have some kind of healthy outside. I have a pastor friend who I can text like with no filters, and we text each other once in a while and laugh about stuff. And he was a guy that discipled me as a high school, college kid. And so, I have a long history with him, and I can ask him questions without feeling like, I think you need to be able to have somebody that you can ask questions where there's no consequences for you asking the question.
And I think the hard part in that is that when you're shifting roles and you stay in your church, it's one thing when you go from church to church, because then all of a sudden you kind of build a new friend group. But when you are evolving in that relationship, it's tough. And I think that's why anytime you see somebody talk about like a healthy life, it's that they have those people almost intentionally outside of their church, because they know that no matter what your role in that church is, it's going to change. So I think you have to have those. And coming from a guy who doesn't have those. So it's me beginning to recognize the fact that I'm going to have to establish some of those. And now my people group is changing, because I've had years of people that I can sit and commiserate about student ministries, but I need to find cool life group pastors to talk with. And I don't know any of those. So,
hey, I have a friend who went from youth ministry to executive pastor, and they were like, the executive pastor community is the most boring community ever. So I can only imagine the life group pastor community is like, besides being a small niche, it's probably a special.
So far, I've been riveted.
Great. Hey, we have another Clergy Cliff Note. Timothy, what do you got for us?
So I'm just coming off vacation, and I wanted to talk a little bit about pastors, ministry leaders taking vacation. What does that look like? So
never.
I think never.
So that was the right answer. Sorry.
I think Delmar, you're going today. Frank, you're vacationing next week. Andrew is still on vacation right now. So I thought it'd be fun, not only in this episode, but if we hit this for a couple of episodes, we have a couple of different ways we could take this for pastors on vacation. But one thing I came across this morning as I was researching this topic was this article in the Gospel Coalition, and the title was The Benefits for Visiting a Church on Vacation. And as in you should, and then a whole list of reasons as to why you should. So I have a little confession.
That's a lot of work.
I have not attended a church on vacation before. Not that I'm just against it. It's just I finally get a chance to breathe a little bit away from that environment with my family. So that's kind of the way. So do you guys attend church on vacation occasionally?
This article gives me anxiety, man.
Dude,
I'm not.
This is too much work. I'm not not doing this amount of research for vacation.
Like it's like
church.
Go on the church's website, look at their statement of faith, then find out where they.
Heidi Carlson wrote it.
I mean,
so then where does she work? What church does she work at that she's at their services 50 weeks out of the year and then going to other churches? That's what I want.
She's obviously an executive pastor. That's kind of no, but I don't know, man, because I am. Here's a hard part for me, and maybe I'm the only one guilty of it. But when I go to church on vacation, oh, this is going to sound bad. It's really hard for me to switch off, man, because I'm looking at their font on the overhead. Oh, yeah. I'm looking at how I got greeted when I came in. Oh my gosh, they have papyrus and Comic Sans. Like, I don't even know where to put that in my soul, you know? So like, I think there's value in going, but when it becomes now the chore of vacation in my world, I'm not vacationing anymore. Right. It's not that I'm checking out of God, but it's just such plugged into my work.
The only times I've ever gone to church on vacation, and like, so a lot of times when I go on vacation, I go to Florida, and I'm going to my in-laws' church, which is a very, very like the largest Southern Baptist church in Tampa, and it's like there's a lot of friends there, and I already know going into it, like I have a couple issues with it because like it's a very traditional worship style, but the preacher actually is like that old school, like, oh man, he's pretty good for being 90 type of thing. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, there's a lot of things there where it's like, I just have to deal with it because it's my family's church kind of thing. But the only time I would really go to church on vacation, I definitely won't do any of this stuff. But like I would, I go to churches like that. Like I follow the church online, like the Village Church in Dallas, or when I went to Southern California, I had to see what the Disney World over Jesus of Saddleback is like. Right? I wanted to see what this monolithic building is with Lauren Daigle as a guest worship leader was like. I had to see all that, right? And so when I go to those experiences, what's interesting is I don't go there with my Frank, I'm a pastor hat. I go there genuinely as like, I respect the pastor or I respect the situation. And like, I just want to enjoy the moment. I'll steal a couple bulletins to like read later, but like that's the extent of it. I find I have a personal issue when I'm visiting a church service that's not my church, and it's not like a church I know anything about or anything like that. I struggle constantly either comparing myself or fighting the issues to make it better, right? So like what you said, Delmar, the font choices, the way the pastor chose to use a certain illustration, not another illustration. Like there's so much in me where I'm fighting in myself not to critique that, like I don't even end up enjoying the service. Where like if I know if I'm going to see Matt Chandler, I'm gonna enjoy this talk. You know what I'm saying? That's just the vibe I'm getting. And like when I went to Philadelphia, I wanted to see Eric Mason's church. When I went to again, Southern California, I wanted to go see what Mariners was all about. Like there were certain aspects I knew I was going to enjoy. And so I kind of put my pastor hat off and just be like, I'm a follower of Christ, visiting a church with some fellow believers. This is going to be fun. That's the tension I live in. And so the last thing I want to do on vacation is critique other pastors just doing their best. You know what I'm saying? That's like, I don't want to do that.
Yep. The last time I went on vacation and went to a church, it was a big church that all of y'all know. And they're passing the name. It was Church of the Highlands. All right, there we go. I was there. It was at the movies, and it was on our honeymoon or something like that. Anyways, we decided we're going to go to church this Sunday, and they don't take up the offering till the end. Okay, so they pass the whole offering. It's a bucket at this church, and my wife and I were kind of on one of the back rows at the end. The bucket ends at her, and she's just standing there with like $5,000 of like cash and bills and coins. And I'm like, did Church of the Highlands just fund our vacation? Because like there was no usher to take it up. And then everyone was just leaving. And I just remember thinking, this is way too much responsibility for vacation. Now we're managing another church's money. So like, and I think for me, that was just kind of like, yeah, I enjoyed doing that, but I just didn't want to be in that position again to where it's like, now I'm critiquing their offering, kind of like what Frank said. And maybe that speaks more about me as a leader needing to disconnect. And that probably is being like, yeah, I'm not disconnecting as much as I should be. If I'm being, because I did one time I went out to California and I did go to Church of the Mariners, and I was so far removed from that culture, it was easier for me to do it. But when it's on this side of the Mason-Dixon line, I'm in that culture.
Yeah.
Okay, so two things. One, first off, Heidi Carlson is a travel blogger who I'm sure is very intelligent and a phenomenal person, but because of who she's married to in her life, she doesn't have to go to church every week. So quit telling me to go to church when I'm on vacation, Heidi. That's the first thing.
I like this guy.
And then second, and here's my flex, is when I was in London, I had to go to Hillsong. So that is the only time that I've ever gone to church while on vacation.
I think it changed somewhat in Dell and Tim. You can probably relate to this, and Jeff too. I assume you have kids, Jeff? Yeah. So it changed for me when we adopted our daughter and I had we have a kid now, and when we started fostering and all that. But like before that, I actually, the churches I've enjoyed going to on vacation the most, and we never made like a rule or anything about it. Just like if we wanted to, we wanted to. I actually have enjoyed going to church plants on vacation because I am able to I go in there with this mindset of like, man, I want to see what they're doing and like be happy for them and cheer for them. And like, and it's usually pretty simple. And so there isn't like a bunch of production to even critique and stuff. And it's like exciting to be in that environment of like, man, this new church, this is cool. We went to a really cool church. I think it was called Aletheia, and it was in Gainesville. And it was super cool. It was an Acts 29 plant. We went there and we like could barely find the building in the park. It was like kind of like fun and exciting. So that's what we've done before. But since I've had kids, nah, man, I'm going to sleep in with and hang out with them and have breakfast at the hotel or whatever.
I do think, Jeff, it's funny you brought that up because last time I was in Tampa, I was pleading with my in-laws to not go to their church. Again, no problem with their big church. I know Tim knows exactly the church I'm talking about. Oh, yeah. There's no problem with the church, but it was just like, I actually want to do what you did. I went to the Acts 29 website. I'm like, what's a good church plan I can support? Because even if I just go there and like give an offering that day, like that's going to mean so much to that church plant to have another person in the crowd. And like what you said, like, there's no pretense. There's no like it's going to be a hot gym or it's going to be, the sound's going to be weird. Like it's a church plant. And I mean, I just felt convicted by that because I was like, I'd rather support a church plant than like a very, historic established church. It's going to be fine for decades, right? Like this church plant might not be
even even if you just go up, like if you do that, pastors listening, go up and like talk to the pastor after and shake his hand. Like he's going to be so encouraged, like, and you could say, hey, I'm a pastor, I'm on vacation,
and do it after the sermon.
Online. Do it after the sermon,
preferably.
And right before he goes up, hey, I'm here to critique you. Right before he walks up.
And here's my commentary. I'm ready.
I have my Greek Bible with me. But anyway,
guys,
when I've done that,
he's
been so encouraged. The pastors have been so encouraged by that to know they have a visitor.
I got to be honest, I've never thought of it from that perspective. And again, I think we're going to be hard pressed on our family vacations to do that. But if I was ever inclined, it would almost be to be an encouragement to those wherever I'm at, that I get to afterwards go, man, I just wanted you to know I came and I visited, and here's how you blessed me, and here's what you guys are doing great.
Man, you just redeemed this whole article from me. So
I'll say this though. If you do visit a church plant, do what everyone just said here. Be encouraging. Tell them that you're a pastor, but do not tell them what they did wrong. Do not go
storm out in the middle.
Do not be like, hey, love the service. Here's what you should fix. That's not.
Well, you put that on the comment card.
Yeah,
if you're going to any church and you're willing to tell it, just stay. Just don't go.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. If your heart can't be there,
you need to sleep more.
Great conversation. Let's keep the show going. We're going to enter into the time of our main discussion. I think this is going to be a good one. We're now our main. Yeah, I know, for real. We've gone so far on this conversation. We're going to talk about things we wish we knew when we first started. What are the things that when you first started in ministry, especially now, like for most of us, when you started in ministry, like me, I was like, I'm a youth ministry lifer. When I get old, I'm going to just write books about youth ministry. If it worked for Doug Fields, it'll work for me. Like, I'm not going to ever leave youth ministry. And then lo and behold, about a decade later, I'm like in an office with an exegetical commentary thinking about how I'm going to preach a sermon to adults, right? Like things change. What are the things you wish you did years ago when you first started in ministry that you wish you could do differently now to help either prepare you for what you're doing now or maybe avoid some of the stumbling blocks or the pitfalls that you felt along the way in this journey?
I wish I would have sat down with more senior pastors. Just to be honest, I spent a lot of my tenure in student ministry networking with student pastors, and I have zero regrets, but I should have carved out more time. Because during this whole without me stepping into this new role and the world falling apart, over the last couple of months, I've been reaching out to my local senior pastors. And the first time I was going to a meeting with one of them, I had to snap out of, I'm a youth pastor. Because I was in front of him and emotionally, I was like, he's a senior pastor, I'm a youth pastor. And I had to remind myself, no, like I have a congregation. And I just realized, man, I wish that I would have been courageous enough maybe or vulnerable enough to sit in front of a senior pastor and say, hey, listen, I don't know what the future holds, but I think I can learn from you. I wish I'd have sat in front of more senior pastors.
I thought you were going to say, but I know who holds the future. That would have been perfect.
You worship leaders.
Come on, man.
I wanted to know who number 2 works for. That's what I wanted to know.
Who does number 2 work for?
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, to quote the great Hamilton, "Talk less, smile more" is good advice. That was for you, Tim. Saw it, enjoyed it. I would say, yeah, for me, I would change it and say you can teach less and smile more. Meaning you don't have to feel, and maybe it was a way I was dealing with insecurities, but like you don't have to feel like you need to be the expert on everything and like burn yourself out trying to be the expert on every little theological nuance of everything. You can just listen to people and, pray with them. And you don't have to feel like, yes, you are I am the lead pastor of this church. I am the primary Bible teacher of this congregation of 40, 50 people. But that doesn't mean that every moment I'm interacting with people has to be teaching. A lot of it can just be living life together and learning from them too. Like learning from some of the older saints. Del, you said you wish you would have spent more time with senior pastors. I wish I would have spent more time with seniors in my church.
Yeah,
like
that's good. Senior
citizens in my church, just like listening to them and sitting with them and talking with them. And from a strategic leadership standpoint, yes, it does accumulate you leadership chips, but it also is a way to just learn. And I think, going into ministry, feeling like, I have to learn only from books and from conferences and from, smart teachers, which is good things to learn from. But I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in the older folks in your church if you'll slow down and listen to them.
Jeff, you are just killing it with the wordplay. I mean, you're just like, gotcha, switch it up. I'm a pastor. Like, you're just destroying it today. Hey, I would say, I've always said that, like, I wish I networked sooner. Like I thought I was smarter than everybody for the first 5 years. But as I think more also of like student ministry, it's like, when you do something for over a decade, like there is some patterns that just become second nature to you. It becomes very easy. And year over year, it's not that youth ministry gets easier, but you have enough skills and tools where like it's just kind of second nature. You don't have to think about it. And therefore you can either become lazy or like just less disciplined. And I think I wish I just remember seasons of youth ministry where I had like no discipline. Like I could if I wanted to wait a day before or the day of to work on my message, plan the game, just wing it, because I know even at my laziest, it could still be a good product. It could still be a good service because I just know how to fake it really well, or I know how to do things where like I wish I had created more discipline in my week. So that way, when I get to where I'm now, where there's no winging it as a senior pastor, there's no winging it as like the main person. Like if you're winging it, there's too many people counting on you that is going to be hurt and at a disadvantage if you just like don't respond to emails until the day they need to hear it. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to have that discipline. And I wish I'd started that sooner, or at least someone convicted me to start it sooner, because I think certain tasks would be a little bit less complicated. Because I know the discipline it takes to plan out certain events or certain things that I was just kind of lazy, and just kind of that's the stereotypes of a youth pastor. They're kind of lazy and they just kind of sit in their office to eat pizza. Like there were seasons where that was true because I knew what I needed to do to make sure the teenagers got what they got and the parents were happy. And then there were seasons where I was convicted by that. And I was like, all right, I got to be a real pastor about this. And now as I'm in this new role, I'm like, there's no room for laziness. Like there's no room for that. And if there is, then like, why am I even a pastor?
I think for me, it's young Tim needed to say, I don't know more often than he did. Young Tim wanted to know everything, so he pretended like he did know everything when he, in fact, still does not know everything. So I think we can't be afraid to say, I don't know. And then another thing that took me probably 4 years to understand was the importance of helping those above me or in front of me in leadership, helping them win instead of constantly trying to tear them down. How could I build them up? And oftentimes, how could I protect them? I remember being sat down with an elder. It was probably my second year in youth ministry, and he was going over receipts with me. And he said, Tim, I see here you spent some of the church's money to play golf with students. And I said, yeah, I did. I took high schoolers out to play golf. That's student ministry. And he scolded me for probably 20 minutes. And I never saw that leader again. And I didn't actually know what happened until 2 years later, when I heard that my senior pastor caught wind of that elder doing that to me behind closed doors without his knowledge. And he handled that appropriately, and he had my back. And it was from that moment on that I thought, wow, he had my back, and then didn't even come and tell me he had my back. He just did it. So what would that look like for us to have our senior leadership's back, even without telling them we have our back?
Well, and even now in this role, having your elders' backs, even towards one another or towards other members in the church, like owning decisions that were made. You know, in your mind, we made this decision as a group of elders, and I was one of the ones who didn't agree with this decision. But I am not going to play the game of, well, I didn't actually agree, but it was an elder decision, so no, it's my decision, and I'm with it.
Like you sign off, and you bought the T-shirt too.
Yeah, and you smile while you wear it.
And talk less.
Yeah, smile more.
Good callback.
Yeah, I think, Frank, I identify a lot with you. Like, my story is that I went to National Youth Workers Convention as a volunteer intern at my church when I was 18 years old. And like, that was it. Like, that's all I needed. Like, I went there and I found my home and I found my people. And I think two parts. One is that I think that I have operated in my season in youth ministry arrogantly, that I'd found the best place and that no other ministry could ever compare to that. And though I still have youth ministry and it's still wildly important, and I hope to, in any seat that I sit in, advocate for it, that there is a whole world out there of other things that need time and attention and are as important, and that I could have, in my season of youth ministry, learn from those people. And again, it didn't matter, because I was like you. It was just a matter of Doug Field stepping aside, and then they were going to ask me to take his role. Like, that's all. Like, it's just I just got to sign the paperwork, which I don't know how you sign paperwork to then become Doug Fields. But that's the dream of every little boy youth pastor, is to just eventually you're going to grow up in this thing. And so to get to now be on this side and go, that's not my story. That's okay. Some of that I've had to let go of, and also go, there's a brave world out there. I wonder what I said no to, because I was waiting for that one yes.
Wow. That's good.
Yeah. I have one more. It kind of came from some woundedness. If I wish I'd have known. And I was trying to think of how to word it to you guys. This is the best I got. I'm not as much of a wordsmith as the poet Jeff Simpson up here, but it's kind of this one. I'll get there. The people who will court you fast, they'll dump you faster.
Ooh.
That's one thing I've learned in ministry. The people who, like, when you show up on the job and they're like, hey man, you're the best thing we've ever seen here. We want to like blow you up and be a part of that ministry. We want to lead a life group for you. Like, I have learned oftentimes that there is an unstated thing behind that. And the second they run into that wall of no, or even, hey, what does that mean? They dump you, and it is public, and it is difficult, and it is messy. So I think now when someone comes up and they want to court really fast, like, obviously, yeah, I want to have that relationship. But at the same time, like, I think we owe it to ourselves. That's that trust but verify, So to me, I've had to learn that there are people who I want to love really fast because they seem to love me really fast. Yes. But like, it's okay to be guarded a little bit.
Well, I think there's people that want to be on the pastor's inner circle because they want to, that's like an identity thing for them. And you have to guard against that, because you're not just their pastor. You're everybody's pastor in the whole congregation. And it's hard because when they start to feel those boundaries, sometimes they don't like that.
Question of the week that was given to us by James Brune. I believe that's his name, James Brune or Braun. He asked us on Instagram, what books would you recommend to a brand new senior pastor or a brand new campus pastor, brand new pastor in general? I believe this guy literally just came into this new role. I think he was in youth ministry and he's now in the senior pastor role. What would you recommend? I'll go first. This book I read with my now boss, he's like the guy overall campus pastors at my campus, because this guy was his senior pastor. I've never heard this book before. But Eugene Peterson endorsed it, and that's a pretty big name. Eugene Peterson said, "This is the freshest and most honest book on pastoral work you'll ever likely to come upon." That's a high praise for Eugene Peterson. It's called The Art of Preaching by David Hansen.
Pastoring,
yeah,
yes.
The Art of Pastoring. Did I say preaching? The Art of Pastoring. Ministry Without the Answers. And it's like, what I love about it is it's a good balance of theological, but also it's insanely practical. It talks about stuff like, we kind of talked about this when it comes to vulnerability, like what does friendship with your congregation look like as a pastor? What does your calling, like how the unique work of being a pastor is both your profession and your calling, and how like that's not true with anything else in the world, right? Like if I work at Popeyes, I don't have to think about frying chicken when I get home. But as a pastor, I think about pastoring when I get home, right? So it has all these other conversations about, you know, the trappings, the temptations you can face, friendships, relationships, your personal life, your friendship, and just very practical stuff like pastoring people through pain. It is an insanely good book, and it's challenging me in terms of pastoring than any other book. It's called The Art of Pastoring by David Hansen.
I am not, again, August 1st is kind of my start date for practical pastoring and all of those sorts of things. So I still feel like I'm in a bit of a preparation season. I think that, coupled with just the season that the church in America has been in a place of listening and learning. So the things that I've been really trying to do is listen and learn about where have I either contributed to or been silent. And so the two things that have been recommended to me that I've been using, one I've actually been using with my family is a devotional book called New Morning Mercies. And it's just like, it's just good. And I can set it down for 3 weeks and then pick it up on whatever date. And you're like, dang, that's good. And probably next year, if I picked it up on the same date, it would hit differently because it's just pointing back to scripture. So I've enjoyed this, like when I get to it on whatever date.
New Morning Mercies by Paul David Tripp, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Best mustache in the game.
Such a good Devo. Yeah.
And then I just preached on Matthew 5 Sermon on the Mount, and I wish I'd had this book when I actually taught on it, but it's called Beatitudes from the Backside. So this guy right here, Beatitudes from the Backside and it looks like Callis, J. Ellsworth Callis, which that guy is only an author if that's your name, but J. Ellsworth Callis. And just, I feel like if what Jesus is saying is true, and then my attitude towards the machine of church and the machine of pastoring might be a little wrong. And to even just say, what are the things that I believe to be true in my own life because it feels good and it feels safe, that I then use scripture to just back up to reinforce what I already believe, rather than going back to Jesus and saying, blessed are the meek and blessed are the humble in spirit and blessed are those who mourn. And so I'm trying to undo, again, love youth ministry, but it's a machine. And so I think I'm trying to undo a little bit of that hype machine that's all I've ever known as an adult.
I've got On Pastoring by H.B. Charles, and I'm going to be honest, I've read this one a couple times, and it's kind of what Frank said. It is a perfect blend of like the why and the what. And he goes into like how we should care for our own selves, but then honestly, then what does it look like for us to care for others? He goes into how we should take care of our families. It goes from that all the way to, okay, how should you structure your sermons? And one of the advantages of this book is he really does encapsulate an entire thought in like 3 or 4 pages. I like the skim. Who was it? R.C. Sproul wrote 101 Essential Truths of Christian Faith. And he was able to do that, take every theology and put it in like 2 pages. And this is basically that for pastoring. And it is so good. So like I said, I'd encourage that one. It's on the same. If you need a 1-2 punch from what Frank was saying, that would be the 2.
I've got 2 as well. One for the ministry side and then one for the just you as a human being side. Ministry side, Pipers, Brothers, we are not professionals. Come on. I mean, in a world of how fast can we build our platform, this one will punch you in the face. And it is exactly what you need to read, especially when you're starting.
Is that Piper?
It's Piper.
I would imagine that's free at desiringgod.org too as well.
It could be. This is the second edition, which is great. Came out in 2013, and it's got a lot of updated stuff in there, especially with social media day and age. And then on the personal side, Jeff, you'll remember this one, Bachman, because we were introduced to this guy at a conference we were at together, and that was An Unhurried Life by Alan Fodling. And this one just did wonders for my soul personally. Is it kind of studies the ministry of Jesus and his rhythm between work and rest and the importance of both and being able to do that well, that you just can't overstate how important resting is for pastors. So An Unhurried Life, Alan Fodling, and Brothers, We Are Not Professionals.
I was cleaning out my bookshelf and like packing up, and I had 2 copies of An Unhurried Life, and I gave it to my junior high pastor. And I was like, look, you can pick from all my youth ministry books, but take this one. And it's so good.
If I can co-sign Unhurried Life, every time I've heard that breakout, I just feel this immense conviction about rushing and not resting, and just the example of Christ, how like he rested, he was patient, he never was in a hurry, and I was like, like it's a convicting book, man.
But he didn't live in America. So along that same line, I got up just a second ago because I changed my mind about what book. I actually have 3 now that I'm going to include this one. But this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, since what you just said, this book is incredible. Great. So read that. But here's the 2 I'd recommend. Number 1, I would say this is important, especially if you're going into a solo pastorate like I did. This book is called Gospel Eldership. The subtitle is Equipping a New Generation of Servant Leaders by Robert H. Thune. And what's great about this book is it's actually like it talks about competency and character, but also about compatibility, which is a really important part of. I have come to learn over the years that there's a difference between theological disagreement and philosophy of ministry disagreement, and philosophy of ministry is really important. It's pretty tough to be on an elder board, especially in a small church, with somebody who has a very different philosophy of ministry from you. There is conflict that comes from that level of incompatibility. So what I like about this book is that it's actually a book that you read together as a small group of guys, and there's exercises in the back and stuff, or exercises at the end of each chapter. So this is really practical. I would encourage just you as a pastor to read this and do it by yourself. And then you can walk even guys who are potential elders down the road through a book like this. So really great one. And then this one's super practical. I know in past generations, there was always like, if you went to Lifeway when that was a thing with stores, you guys remember that?
Oh yeah.
And they always had those little pastor's manuals. Well, this one from Crossway, really great. The Pastor's Book. This is full of all the practical things like how to do weddings and funerals and all that stuff. So I would definitely get one of those if you're moving from like a youth ministry role into a lead role or whatever. It's just great. It's written by R. Kent Hughes, who's a good voice, good author. So that one's super practical.
Love it. That Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, I believe.
Yeah.
John Mark Comer, he's such an interesting writer. Like he's like funny, but he's like very thoughtful.
His other books are really good.
God too. Has a Name. Yeah. Like really messed me up.
And Garden City. Garden City is great too.
I haven't read Garden City, but God Has a Name messed me up when it comes to like some of like thoughts I've never thought about when it comes to like demons and stuff. It was just like,
and he's one of those voices that you find where you're like, oh, he's saying things that have kind of been rattling around in my head, but I don't know how to put into words, because he comes from like a contemplative and Pentecostal background. So
yeah,
and I would say I'm kind of that I would put myself in that mix somewhere.
Ooh, spicy. Hey, all these books that you just heard are going to be in the show notes and with Amazon links. So if you missed one, don't forget to write it down.
Somebody listening was rewinding like every 5 seconds to catch those. Sorry,
we
man.
got you.
Yeah, we got you. All the links are going to be in the show notes. And it's not even going to be like where I make money off of it because Wisconsin doesn't let you do that on Amazon. So go to the show notes so you can get all the links, Amazon links to get any of these books. Every single book that was recommended are super solid. Like I'm probably going to, all the books that I don't have right now, I'm going to purchase them right now. Hey, this was so fun. Jeff Bachman, thank you so much for being on here.
Dude, thank you guys for inviting me. This was so much fun.
Is there
this is what being adult pastors is like? I'm in. Apparently, I'm going to sign up, man. This is fun.
Dude. Well, guess what? There is a Facebook group that we have, which I don't know if you're in it, but I'm going to make sure you're in it. That is hopefully the same exact vibe as this. And it's called the Practically Pastoring Facebook group, where we can keep chatting about what it means to practically pastor. There's obviously Instagram. We have the YouTube channel with amazing, like it's the video format of this show, as well as clips from the different parts of the show. It's a great time. We'd love for everyone to check that out. Hey, Jeff, is there anything you want to really just give a shout out? Any podcast, social media that we should know about so we can find more about you, Jeff?
Oh, for me, dude. I mean, I don't know. I I feel like I was telling my friend, I was having coffee with my friend this morning. I have been in this season, I've been like rewatching stuff. And there was a song that I used to listen to because of an old TV show that I watched. It's called I'm Waiting for My Real Life to Begin. And I feel like I'm literally standing like at the precipice, there's your big word, of like what's happening. And so I don't know. I actually think like as I start handing off keys to other things, I think I'm going to Bob Goff my life a little bit and start quitting a few things. So like where you can find me, I know for sure. I'm J Bachman on Instagram, super creative. And the one podcast that I am consistently going to start doing here in the fall is my Bachelor podcast. So like I said, find that on Instagram. I have been doing a pop culture one called What It Is, What It Means that has been dormant for a bit. And I'm prayerfully considering what my future looks like.
Yeah, I love it. Anything you do, I'm a fan of it. So I'm going to make sure you check it out.
Too kind. I have loved, like I said, it's fun to like, gosh, man, ministry has gone and brought these people that you just now are call friends. And that you see them once a year if COVID wasn't around, but that you go, these are trusted people that I would ask for prayer and support and wisdom and advice. So, and those who I got to meet for the first time, this is cool, guys. Thank you. I'm honored to be a part and to just add whatever I did or to make your lives more difficult by being mean. So
Silver Fox, we love you.
Awesome. With that being said, make sure you subscribe, give us a 5-star rating on Amazon because we have a book, on Apple Podcasts, and wherever you're listening to this, subscribe. We are glad that you're here, and we want to keep the conversation going, so make sure you go join our Facebook group. With that being said, I'm Frank Gill.
I'm Jeff Simpson.
I'm Delmar Pete.
I'm Timothy Miller.
And I am Jeff Bachman.
And we are Practically Pastoring. See you next time.